The billionaire's triplets were dying, until the old maid did the unthinkable. The silence in the penthouse was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and smelled sharply of antiseptic. It was the smell of a hospital, transported into a $50 million mansion. Liam, 35 years old, and wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, stood behind the glass wall of the nursery, his hands clenched so tightly into fists that his knuckles were white. He wasn't looking at the breathtaking view of the city skyline. He was looking at 3 small, identical beds arranged in a semicircle. Inside the room, the triplets, Chloe, Mia, and Zoe, lay perfectly still. They were 4 years old, but they looked much younger. Their skin was translucent, pale as porcelain, and their heads were completely bald, a testament to the aggressive treatments that had failed them. They were fading, not violently but quietly, like candles flickering out in a draughtless room. "Mr. Harrington," the doctor said softly, stepping up beside Liam. Dr. Evans was one of the best specialists in the world, flown in specifically for this, but even he looked defeated. "We've tried the new protocol. Their bodies aren't rejecting it exactly, they just aren't responding. It's as if they have given up." Liam turned, his eyes bloodshot and terrifyingly intense. "4-year-olds don't give up, doctor. They fight. Fix them." "We are doing everything medicine allows," Dr. Evans replied, his voice calm but firm. "But their immune systems are non-existent. Their weight is critically low. If they don't start eating and showing some physiological engagement within the next 48 hours, we need to discuss palliative care." Palliative care. The polite word for letting them die. Liam slammed his hand against the glass, startling a nurse inside the room. No one gives up. You keep this environment sterile. You keep them monitored. I don't care what it costs, just keep them alive." He stormed away before the doctor could see the tears threatening to spill. Liam had already lost his wife during the birth. He would not lose his daughters. He had turned his home into a fortress against death. No germs, no dust, no outsiders. Downstairs, in the servants' entrance, Sarah was undergoing the most rigorous decontamination process of her life. At 25, Sarah was stunningly beautiful, with warm hazel eyes and an energy that seemed to vibrate with life. But right now, she was terrified. She needed this job. Her family back in the countryside was drowning in debt, and the salary offered by the Harrington estate was unheard of. "Scrub your hands again," the head housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, barked. She was a stern woman who monitored the staff like a prison warden. "Mr. Harrington fires people for sneezing. If you bring a single speck of dust into the West Wing, you won't just be fired, you'll be sued." "I understand," Sarah said, scrubbing her skin until it was raw. She changed into the required uniform, a crisp, sterile blue and white dress that looked more like a nurse's outfit than a maid's. "Your job is simple," Mrs. Higgins explained as they walked through the silent marble hallways. "You clean the nursery anteroom. You do not speak to the children. You do not touch the children unless explicitly ordered by a nurse. You are a ghost. Do you understand? Mr. Harrington believes that external stimulation stresses them." When Sarah finally reached the glass wall of the nursery, she stopped dead in her tracks. She had expected to see sick children. She hadn't expected to see this. The room was grey, the walls were beige, the sheets were white, the nurses wore blue. There was no colour, there were no toys, there was no music. The 3 little girls lay in their beds, hooked up to monitors that beeped in a slow, monotonous rhythm. They weren't sleeping. They were staring at the ceiling with empty, glassy eyes. Sarah felt a physical ache in her chest. She had grown up in a house full of noise, cooking, and chaos. This wasn't a home. It was a waiting room for death. She watched as a nurse brought in a tray for lunch. It was a bowl of grey, organic nutrient paste. The nurse held a spoon to Chloe's mouth. The little girl didn't even turn her head. She just kept staring at the ceiling. The nurse sighed, made a note on a clipboard, and moved to Mia. Same reaction. Zoe, the smallest, actually turned her head away, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "They aren't hungry," Sarah whispered to herself, pressing her hand against the glass. "They're bored to death, literally." "What did you say?" Liam's voice boomed behind her. Sarah spun around, her heart hammering. The billionaire was towering over her, smelling of expensive cologne and despair. He looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed. I apologize, sir," Sarah stammered, lowering her head. "I was just observing." "You aren't paid to observe," Liam snapped, walking past her to glare at the nurses failing to feed his children. "You're paid to clean. If I see you idling again, you're gone." He watched the girls refuse the food, his face crumbling for a split second before he masked it with anger. "Try the tube," he ordered the nurses through the intercom. "If they won't eat, force it. They need the calories." Sarah watched in horror as the nurses prepared a feeding tube. The girls didn't fight back. They just went limp. It was the saddest thing Sarah had ever seen. Liam turned away, unable to watch, and retreated to his office. Sarah spent the next 6 hours scrubbing floors that were already spotless. But her mind wasn't on the cleaning. It was on those girls. She knew something these doctors and this billionaire didn't. She knew that the will to live wasn't found in a nutrient paste or a sterile room. It was found in joy, in color, in love. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the cold mansion, Sarah finished her shift. She should have gone to her quarters. She should have kept her head down. But she couldn't get the image of Zoe's tear out of her mind. She walked past the kitchen. The professional chefs were packing up. They made gourmet food for Liam, but for the girls, they only prepared the bland, medically optimized sludge. Sarah looked at the pantry. It was stocked with everything imaginable. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. "The stomach is the way to the heart, Sarah, but the eyes are the way to the soul." She checked the hallway. Empty. The cameras were everywhere, but the security team was changing shifts. She had a 20-minute window where the monitoring was lax. It was insane. It was grounds for immediate termination. But Sarah wasn't just a maid. She was a woman who couldn't watch children fade away. She took a deep breath, tied her apron tighter, and stepped into the kitchen. She wasn't going to clean. She was going to cook. The kitchen was a marvel of stainless steel and cold marble, much like the rest of the house. Sarah moved quickly, her heart racing against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew the risks. If Liam found her handling food that wasn't on the approved menu, he wouldn't just fire her, he'd likely destroy her future references. But the memory of those 3 identical, hopeless faces pushed her forward. She didn't reach for the kale or the organic protein powder. She reached for flour, sugar, eggs, and vanilla. She reached for the food coloring, bottles of red, blue, yellow, and green that sat dusty on a high shelf, likely unused for years. They need life, Sarah thought, cracking eggs with practiced precision. They don't need nutrients, they need magic. She worked with a speed born of desperation. She whipped the batter, separating it into different bowls. In one, she added a drop of red, turning the mixture into a vibrant strawberry pink. In another, a brilliant sky blue. Then, a sunny yellow. She was making her grandmother's rainbow cake, a recipe that had cured every scraped knee and broken heart in her family for 3 generations. As the layers baked, a smell began to waft through the sterile ventilation system. It wasn't the smell of steamed vegetables or sanitizer. It was the warm, sweet, buttery scent of home. It smelled like birthdays. It smelled like comfort. Upstairs in the nursery, the steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitors stuttered slightly. Zoe, the smallest triplet, twitched her nose. Her eyes, which had been fixed on the ceiling for days, shifted slightly toward the door. Down in the kitchen, Sarah assembled the cake. It was a masterpiece of defiance. She covered the colourful layers in a fluffy white frosting, hiding the surprise inside. She cut a massive slice, revealing the vibrant stripes of colour. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. It was the most beautiful thing in the entire house. She placed the slice on a simple white plate. She didn't have permission. She didn't have a medical clearance. She just had a gut feeling that was screaming at her. She took the service elevator up to the west wing. The hallway was quiet. It was 8:12 p.m. Liam usually locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch at this hour, drowning his sorrows. The night nurse, a kind but exhausted woman named Betty, was at the station, dozing off over a chart. Sarah slipped past her, moving silently in her rubber-soled shoes. She reached the nursery door. Her hand trembled as she gripped the handle. "This is it," she thought. "Once I open this door, there is no going back." She pushed it open. The air inside was cool and filtered. The girls were awake, but barely. They looked like little ghosts in the dim light. Sarah walked in, not with the hesitant, fearful steps of the medical staff, but with a confident, warm stride. She didn't wear a mask. She wanted them to see her smile. "Hello, little ones," Sarah whispered, her voice like a warm blanket in the icy room. The sound of a new voice made Mia turn her head. Sarah set the plate down on the small round table in the center of the room. The smell of the vanilla frosting instantly overpowered the antiseptic odor. It was jarring, almost shocking in its sweetness. "I heard a rumor," Sarah said, crouching down so she was at eye level with the beds. "I heard that you three are bored. And I heard you don't like the grey soup." Chloe blinked. It was the first voluntary movement she had made all day. "So," Sarah continued, her eyes sparkling, "I brought you something better. But it's a secret. Can you keep a secret?" She walked over to the beds. The protocol said never lift them without a nurse present. Sarah ignored it. She gently slid her arms under Zoe, lifting the frail child. Zoe felt light as a feather, nothing but bones and dry skin. Sarah's heart broke, but she kept her smile plastered on. She carried Zoe to the table and sat her down. Then she went back for Mia, then Chloe. The three girls sat at the table, slumped in their chairs, looking at the plate. Then Sarah did the unthinkable. She took a fork, cut a piece of the rainbow cake, and held it up. The colors popped against the white room. It was shocking. It was bright. It was real. "Look at that," Sarah whispered. "It's a rainbow. You can eat the rainbow." Zoe's eyes widened. For the first time in months, a spark of curiosity flickered in her dull pupils. She reached out a trembling, bony hand. "That's it," Sarah encouraged, handing her the fork. Zoe took the fork. Her hand shook. She brought the cake to her lips. The moment the sugar hit her tongue, something happened. Zoe's eyes didn't just widen, they lit up. A chemical reaction, ancient and primal, fired in her brain. The taste of sugar and butter, the rush of energy, the sheer pleasure of flavor after months of grey sludge. Zoe swallowed. Then she did something that would have shocked the doctors more than any medicine. She smiled. A tiny, weak, crooked smile. "Yummy," Zoe whispered. Her voice was raspy, unused. Chloe and Mia stared at their sister. Then, with a burst of sudden energy, they reached for the cake with their bare hands, grabbing chunks of the colorful sponge. Sarah laughed, a genuine bubbling sound that bounced off the soundproof walls. "Eat," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "Eat it all." The girls were eating. They were making a mess. Crumbs fell on the floor. Frosting smeared on their pale cheeks, but the monitors behind them began to change. The slow, dying rhythm of their heartbeats picked up. Beep, 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 turned into beep, 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 beep. The lines on the screens jumped. They were coming back to life. Sarah was so focused on the miracle happening at the table, Zoe actually giggling as she licked frosting off her finger, that she didn't hear the heavy footsteps in the hallway. She didn't hear the door handle turn. She was busy wiping Mia's face with a napkin, beaming with love at these children she barely knew, when the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The girls stopped eating. They looked past Sarah, their eyes going wide with fear. Sarah froze. She turned around slowly. Standing in the doorway was Liam. He wasn't wearing his jacket, his tie was undone, and his face was a mask of absolute unadulterated horror. He stared at the mess, the crumbs on the floor, the contaminated food, the unmasked maid touching his dying children. He looked at the cake as if it were a pile of rat poison. His mouth opened, his chest heaving with a mixture of panic and rage. To him, this wasn't a party. It was an assassination attempt on immune-compromised children. "What?" Liam's voice started as a low growl, vibrating through the room. "Have you done?" He lunged forward, not toward the girls, but toward Sarah. The room exploded into chaos. The stillness that had defined the nursery for months was shattered in a single second. Liam didn't just walk into the room. He stormed in like a force of nature, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. To him, the scene wasn't a birthday party. It was a crime scene. He saw an unauthorized employee, a cleaner no less, covered in germs from the outside world, feeding his immunocompromised daughters a substance that looked like pure poison. "Get away from them!" Liam roared, his voice cracking with the sheer volume of his panic. He reached the table in 2 long strides. Sarah, still on her knees wiping Mia's face, barely had time to look up before Liam's hand clamped around her upper arm. His grip was iron-hard, fueled by adrenaline. He yanked her back so forcefully that she stumbled, nearly knocking over the chair Zoe was sitting in. "Sir, please, look at them!" Sarah gasped, wincing at the pain in her arm. "Don't you dare speak!" Liam shouted, his eyes wild. He looked at the girls. "Spit it out! Chloe, Mia, spit it out right now!" The triplets, who had been giggling just seconds ago, froze. The sudden violence of their father's entrance terrified them, but they didn't go limp this time. The sugar coursing through their tiny veins had given them a spark of alertness they hadn't possessed in weeks. Liam grabbed the white plate with the remaining rainbow cake. He didn't just move it, he hurled it across the room. The china smashed against the far wall, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The colorful sponge cake lay ruined on the pristine, sanitized floor, a vibrant insult to the grey room. "You have killed them," Liam hissed, turning back to Sarah, his chest heaving. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Their systems can't handle bacteria. They can't handle processed sugar. You've just signed their death warrants." "I haven't killed them. I woke them up," Sarah cried out, fighting against his grip. She pointed a trembling finger at the table. "Look at Zoe. Look at her eyes, Mr. Harrington. She's actually looking at you." Liam didn't look. He couldn't. He was blinded by the trauma of his past, by the fear of losing the last pieces of his wife. He dragged Sarah toward the door. The commotion had alerted the security team. 2 large men in black suits appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain. "Get her out," Liam ordered, shoving Sarah toward them. "Get her off my property immediately. Throw her out the front gate and call the police. I want to press charges for child endangerment." "No, wait!" Sarah pleaded, digging her heels into the carpet. She wasn't fighting for her job anymore. She was fighting for the truth. "They are starving for life, not for medicine. They need color. They need joy. If you keep them in this white box, they will die of sadness." "Get her out!" Liam screamed, his voice breaking. The guards grabbed Sarah by the elbows. They weren't rough, but they were firm. As they dragged her backward into the hallway, Sarah locked eyes with Zoe one last time. The little girl wasn't crying. She was sitting up straight in her chair, chocolate frosting smeared on her chin, watching the scene with wide, curious eyes. For the first time, she looked like a child. not a patient. "Don't let them go back to sleep," Sarah yelled down the hallway as she was hauled away. "Promise me you won't let them go back to sleep." Liam slammed the nursery door shut, severing the connection. The silence rushed back in, but it was vibrating with tension. He spun around to face his daughters, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He expected to see them seizing. He expected to see them vomiting. He reached for the emergency call button on the wall and mashed it with his fist. "Dr. Evans, get up here now, code red," he shouted into the intercom. He ran to the bathroom, grabbing a sterilized cloth and soaking it in warm water. He rushed back to Mia and began frantically scrubbing the frosting off her face. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Daddy's here. We're going to get this poison off you. You're going to be okay." Mia pulled her face away. Liam froze. Mia had never pulled away before. She had always been a passive doll. But now she frowned, a tiny wrinkle appearing between her non-existent eyebrows. She made a sound, a small grunt of protest. "No," Mia whispered. Liam stared at her, the wet cloth hovering in mid-air. "What?" "No," she said again, louder this time. She looked at the smashed cake on the floor, then back at her father. "Cake!" Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. He didn't know how to process this. Before he could react, the door burst open again. Dr. Evans ran in, followed by 2 nurses with a crash cart. "What is it? Is it cardiac arrest?" Dr. Evans barked, scanning the monitors. "She fed them," Liam said, his voice hollow. "The maid. She fed them street food, cake, sugar. God knows what bacteria was on her hands. Pump their stomachs. Do whatever you have to do." Dr. Evans rushed to the girls. He pulled out his stethoscope, placing it on Chloe's chest. He checked her pupils. He checked her pulse. The nurses prepared the stomach pump, their faces grim. Outside, the weather had turned. A torrential downpour had begun, hammering against the mansion's roof. Sarah was thrown out of the front gate, literally. The guards walked her to the edge of the property and released her. She stumbled onto the wet asphalt, the rain instantly soaking her thin uniform. The heavy iron gates slammed shut behind her with a final metallic clang. She stood there in the dark, shivering, the rain mixing with the tears on her face. She had lost the best-paying job she'd ever had. She would likely be sued. She had nothing. But as she looked up at the lit window of the nursery on the 3rd floor, she didn't regret it. She had seen the spark. She had seen the life return to those eyes. "Live," she whispered into the storm. "Please just live." Inside the nursery, the atmosphere was thick with medical panic. Dr. Evans moved from Chloe to Mia to Zoe, his movements precise and urgent. Liam stood in the corner, his back pressed against the wall, his hands covering his mouth. He was praying, something he hadn't done since his wife died. "Please don't take them. I was trying to protect them. Please." "Stop," Dr. Evans said suddenly. The single word cut through the room. The nurses, who were prepping the tubes for the stomach pump, froze. "Dr. Evans," one nurse asked, "shall we proceed with the lavage?" "I said stop," Dr. Evans repeated. He wasn't looking at the equipment. He was looking at the cardiac monitors mounted on the wall. He adjusted his glasses, squinting as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Liam stepped forward, his legs feeling like lead. "What is it? Are they crashing?" "No," Dr. Evans said slowly, turning to look at Liam. His expression was one of total bewilderment. "Mr. Harrington, come here." Liam forced himself to walk to the monitors. He expected to see flat lines or erratic, dangerous rhythms. Instead, he saw strong, steady green peaks. "Look at their heart rates," Dr. Evans pointed. "For the last 6 months, their resting heart rate has been dangerously low, barely hovering above 45 beats per minute, bradycardic. Their bodies were in a state of hibernation, shutting down." "I know," Liam whispered. "Look at it now," the doctor commanded. Liam looked. Chloe, 85 BPM. Mia, 88 BPM. Zoe, 90 BPM. This isn't a tachycardia from shock, Dr. Evans murmured, checking the oxygen saturation levels. Their O2 levels are up to 98%. Their color. He gently touched Zoe's cheek. The pale, translucent skin had a faint pink flush to it. Their capillary refill time is normal. What does that mean? Liam asked, his voice shaking. Dr. Evans turned to the girls. Zoe was currently licking her finger, trying to get the last taste of the frosting that Liam hadn't managed to scrub off. It means, Dr. Evans said, lowering his stethoscope, that they are not dying, Liam. They are metabolizing. The doctor walked over to the smashed remains of the cake on the floor. He knelt down, heedless of his expensive trousers, and picked up a crumb. He sniffed it. Vanilla, butter, sugar. High caloric density, Dr. Evans muttered to himself. Immediate glucose spike, dopamine release. He stood up and looked at Liam with a grave but enlightened expression. We have been treating them as if they were made of glass. We fed them nutrient paste that required zero effort to digest, but gave them zero pleasure. We kept them in a sterile room that gave their immune systems nothing to practice on. I was protecting them, Liam defended himself, though his voice lacked conviction. You were starving them, Dr. Evans said bluntly. Not of food, but of stimulation. The cortisol levels in their blood, the stress hormone, have likely been sky high from isolation. That suppresses the immune system. This, he gestured to the messy, frosting-covered girls. This sugar rush, this excitement, it triggered an endorphin release. It woke up their adrenal glands. It jump-started their systems. Liam looked at his daughters, really looked at them. Zoe looked back. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked annoyed. More, Zoe demanded, pointing at the empty table. Liam felt the world tilt on its axis. More. Cake, Mia chimed in. More rainbow. Liam's knees gave out. He collapsed into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. He began to sob, harsh, racking sobs that shook his entire body. The relief was so intense, it was physically painful. He had spent years building a fortress to keep death out, only to realize he had been locking life out too. He had fired the only person who had seen the truth. He looked up, his eyes red and wet. The maid, he choked out. Sarah. She seems to have better clinical instincts than I do, Dr. Evans admitted dryly, wiping his hands on a sanitizing cloth. If I were you, Mr. Harrington, I would find her. These girls don't need a stomach pump. They need that cake. And they probably need her. Liam stood up. The panic of death was gone, replaced by a new panic, the panic of regret. He ran to the window. The storm outside was raging. The wind was bending the trees in the garden. She's on foot, Liam realized, horror dawning on him. I threw her out in this. He didn't wait for an umbrella. He didn't wait for his security detail. He didn't even put on his jacket. Liam Harrington, the billionaire who wouldn't touch a doorknob without a sanitizer wipe, ran out of the nursery, sprinted down the marble staircase, and burst out the front door into the pouring rain. Sarah! He screamed, his voice swallowed by the thunder. He ran toward the main gates, his expensive Italian shoes splashing through puddles. He punched the code into the keypad, and the heavy iron gates groaned open. The street outside was dark and empty. The rain fell in sheets, blurring visibility. Sarah! He yelled again, running down the sidewalk. He saw a small, huddled figure sitting on the curb under the harsh light of a street lamp about 100 yards away. She had her knees pulled up to her chest, her head buried in her arms. She looked like a discarded pile of laundry. Liam sprinted toward her. He was soaked to the bone, his hair plastered to his forehead, his shirt clinging to his skin. He skidded to a halt in front of her. Sarah looked up. Her mascara was running down her cheeks. She was shivering violently, her lips blue from the cold. When she saw him, she flinched, expecting him to yell at her again, or perhaps tell her the police were on their way. Did they die? She stammered, her teeth chattering. Are they gone? Liam dropped to his knees on the wet pavement, ruining his suit, disregarding the mud and the filth. He grabbed her hands. They were ice cold. "No," Liam gasped, struggling to catch his breath. "They aren't gone. They're asking for more cake." Sarah blinked, rain dripping from her eyelashes. "What?" "You saved them," Liam said, his voice cracking. "Dr. Evans said you woke them up. I was killing them with the silence, and you brought the noise." He squeezed her hands tighter. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry, Sarah. I was a fool. I was a terrified, arrogant fool." Sarah stared at him. This wasn't the imperious billionaire who had looked at her like she was dirt. This was a father who had been brought to his knees. "Please," Liam begged, the rain mixing with his tears. "Please come back. I'll pay you triple. I'll give you anything you want. Just don't leave them. They need you. I think I need you to show me how to be a father again." Sarah looked at his desperate face. She could have walked away. She could have told him to go to hell. But she thought of Zoe, Mia, and Chloe. She thought of the way Zoe's eyes had lit up at the sight of a simple color. Slowly, Sarah nodded. "Okay," she whispered, "but things change. No more grey, no more silence." "Anything," Liam vowed. "We'll paint the whole damn house a rainbow if you want." He helped her stand up, and for a moment they stood close in the rain, the barrier of class and wealth washed away by the storm, leaving just two people united by a miracle. Liam put his arm around her to shield her from the wind, and together they walked back toward the mansion. It didn't look like a fortress anymore. With the lights on in the nursery window, it finally looked like a home. The transition from the storm outside to the warmth of the mansion marked the beginning of a new era for the Harrington estate. Liam and Sarah stood in the grand foyer, dripping water onto the marble floors that had been polished to a mirror shine earlier that day. Mrs. Higgins, the head housekeeper, rushed forward with a towel, her face a mask of shock. She looked from the billionaire's ruined suit to the maid's shivering form, expecting a firing squad. "Sir, I am so sorry," Mrs. Higgins gasped, glaring at Sarah. "I will have security remove her immediately. I don't know how she got back in." "Stop," Liam said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that froze the room. He took the towel Mrs. Higgins offered, but instead of drying himself, he wrapped it gently around Sarah's shoulders. "Sarah isn't going anywhere," Liam announced, looking at the staff gathering in the hallway. "From this moment on, Sarah is in charge of the triplets' nutritional and recreational care. If she asks for ingredients, you buy them. If she wants to paint the walls, you hand her a brush. If she wants to open the windows, you let the breeze in. Do I make myself clear?" Mrs. Higgins' jaw dropped. "But, sir, the protocol, the sterility—" "The protocol is dead," Liam said firmly. He looked at Sarah, a small, tired smile touching his lips. "We're trying a new prescription. It's called living." The next few weeks were a blur of color and noise. The transformation of the West Wing was nothing short of a revolution. The first thing to go was the silence. Sarah brought in a small radio and played soft, cheerful music, jazz, pop, Disney songs. At first, the girls just listened, their heads tilting toward the sound like flowers turning toward the sun. Then they started to hum. Next, the curtains were thrown open. The blackout shades that had kept the nursery in a perpetual gloomy twilight were replaced with sheer, airy fabrics that let the golden morning light flood the room. Sarah pinned drawings to the walls, crude crayon scribbles that the girls made with trembling hands. To anyone else, they were scribbles. To Liam, they were masterpieces. He framed the first drawing Zoe made, a lopsided red circle that was supposed to be a ball, and hung it in his office, right next to his billion-dollar merger contracts. The most important change, however, happened in the kitchen. The sterile nutrient paste was banished forever. Sarah taught the chefs, who were initially offended but eventually charmed, how to make happy food. Pancakes shaped like teddy bears, vegetable soups that were bright orange and green, smoothies that tasted like milkshakes but were packed with vitamins. Every meal became a celebration. Liam, who used to eat alone in the dining room while reading stock reports, began to eat in the nursery. He sat on a small, uncomfortable plastic chair, his long legs cramped under the tiny table, watching his daughters eat. The recovery wasn't overnight. There were hard days. Muscles that had atrophied needed physical therapy, which was painful. There were nights of fevers as their bodies adjusted to the new world. But through it all, Sarah was there. She was the anchor. One evening, a month into the new regime, Liam found Sarah in the nursery. The girls were asleep. Their breathing was deep and rhythmic, a stark contrast to the shallow, fragile breaths of the past. Their cheeks were rounder now, flushed with health. A soft fuzz of hair was beginning to grow back on their heads. Sarah was standing by the window looking out at the city lights. She looked exhausted. She had been working 18-hour days, pouring every ounce of her soul into the children. Liam walked in quietly. He was holding 2 glasses of wine. "You're off the clock, Sarah," he said softly. She turned, startled. "Oh, Mr. Harrington, I was just checking the humidifier." "Liam," he corrected her, as he had done every day for the past week. "Please, call me Liam." He handed her a glass. "You saved them," he said, looking at the sleeping forms of his daughters. "Dr. Evans examined them today. He said their white blood cell count is normal, not acceptable, normal. He called it a medical anomaly. I called it the Sarah effect." Sarah took the wine, blushing slightly. "They did the work. They wanted to be here. They just needed a reason." "You were the reason," Liam said, stepping closer. The air between them shifted. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something deeper, something that had been growing in the quiet moments, when their hands brushed while passing a plate, or when they shared a tired laugh over a messy painting session. "I realized something," Liam continued, his voice low. "I spent so much time trying to keep them alive that I forgot to be their father. I was just their warden. You taught me that safety isn't the most important thing. Happiness is." He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the kindness in her hazel eyes, the strength in her gentle hands, the way she bit her lip when she was thinking. She wasn't just the maid. She was the woman who had brought his world back from the dead. "I don't know how to repay you," Liam admitted. Sarah took a sip of wine, her eyes locking with his. "You don't owe me anything." Seeing them laugh, "That's my paycheck." "It's not enough," Liam whispered. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers before he gently took it. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, rough from cleaning and cooking. "I don't want you to just be their caretaker, Sarah. I don't want you to be an employee at all." Sarah's breath hitched. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Liam said, stepping into her space, "that this house was a tomb before you walked into it. You didn't just wake them up. You woke me up." He leaned in, giving her ample time to pull away. She didn't. She tilted her head up, her eyes fluttering shut. When his lips met hers, it wasn't a desperate collision like the storm outside had been. It was soft, sweet, and tasted like wine and promise. It was the seal on a new life. 6 months later, the gardens of the Harrington estate, once manicured to the point of being artificial, were now chaos. But it was a beautiful chaos. Streamers hung from the ancient oak trees, balloons bobbed in the breeze. A giant bouncy castle, in the shape of a castle, sat in the middle of the lawn, looking ridiculous against the backdrop of the serious stone mansion. It was the triplets' 5th birthday. Dozens of guests were there, business partners, old friends, and even the staff's families. The press had been kept at the gates, but the rumors had spread. The Harrington triplets, once thought to be terminally ill, were back. "Daddy, watch this!" Liam turned from a conversation with a bewildered senator to see Mia sprinting across the grass. She was wearing a dress that looked like it was made of rainbows, Sarah's design, obviously. Her hair had grown into a short pixie cut of soft brown curls. She didn't look sick. She looked vibrant, energetic, and loud. Mia did a clumsy cartwheel, landing on her bottom and dissolving into giggles. Chloe and Zoe were right behind her, chasing a golden retriever puppy that Liam had bought them last week. "She has good form," a voice said beside him. Liam smiled and wrapped his arm around the woman standing next to him. Sarah looked radiant. She wasn't wearing a maid's uniform. She was wearing an elegant floral sundress that matched the girl's energy. She looked every bit the lady of the house, though she still preferred to be in the thick of the playing rather than sipping champagne with the elites. "They are miracles," Liam said, watching his daughters tackle the puppy. "They are resilient," Sarah corrected him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "They just needed the right fuel." "Speaking of fuel," Liam laughed, gesturing toward the main table. There, in the center of the spread, was not a catered French pastry or a molecular gastronomy dessert. It was a massive, three-tiered homemade rainbow cake. It was slightly leaning to the left because the girls had helped frost it, and the sprinkles were uneven, but to Liam it was the most beautiful object on earth. Dr. Evans walked up to them, holding a plate with a massive slice of the cake. He looked happier than Liam had ever seen him. "I must admit, Doctor," Evans said, taking a bite and wiping frosting from his lip, "this prescription is much more effective than the IV drips. I'm thinking of writing a paper on it. The pediatric benefits of confectionery intervention." Liam laughed, pulling Sarah closer. "Don't forget the primary ingredient, Doctor, which is love," Liam said unironically. 6 months ago, he would have scoffed at such a cheesy line. Now, he lived by it. "And a stubborn woman who doesn't follow rules." Sarah nudged him in the ribs. "I follow the important rules, like always lick the spoon." Liam looked out at the garden. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the scene. The nightmare of the sterile white room felt like a different lifetime. He remembered the moment he stood in the doorway, horrified at the sight of the cake. He shuddered to think what would have happened if he had succeeded in throwing Sarah out that night. He would have been standing here alone, visiting 3 small graves. Instead, he was surrounded by noise. "Attention, everyone!" Liam called out, tapping a spoon against his glass. The chatter died down. The triplets stopped running and looked at their father. "I want to make a toast," Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. He raised his glass. "To the 3 strongest little women I know, Chloe, Mia, and Zoe, happy birthday." "Happy birthday!" the crowd cheered. "And," Liam continued, turning to Sarah, he took her hand and pulled her to the center of the circle. The crowd went silent, sensing the gravity of the moment. Sarah looked at him, her eyes wide. "To the woman who saved us," Liam said, his voice trembling slightly. He reached into his pocket. He didn't drop to one knee. That was too cliché, and Sarah hated cliché. Instead, he simply held out a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a massive diamond that screamed wealth. It was a ring with 3 small gemstones, sapphire, ruby, and emerald, surrounding a bright, clear diamond. A rainbow. "Sarah," Liam said, looking into her eyes, "you brought color into my grey world. I don't want to live a single day without you. Will you marry us? Me, Chloe, Mia, and Zoe?" Sarah covered her mouth with her hands. Tears streamed down her face. Happy tears this time. She looked at the girls, who were now jumping up and down, screaming, "Say yes! Say yes!" She looked back at Liam. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes!" Liam slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, lifting her off the ground as the guests erupted in applause. The triplets ran forward, hugging their legs, burying them in a group embrace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the garden lights flickered on, illuminating the happy family. Inside the mansion, the nursery was empty. The monitors were unplugged. The white sheets were gone. The room was dark, but it wasn't a scary darkness anymore. It was just a room, waiting for the children to come back after a long day of living, to dream in full, vivid color. The end.